Dragon here, and welcome to part 2 of my Dwarf Fortress Let's Play Playalong tutorial thing. Right, so what we're going to do today is, or at least in this episode, obviously it's the same day, we're going to set up the game itself. We're going to tweak some settings to make things a little bit easier for the starting player. I'm going to talk about what the hell all of this is, and hopefully in the next video we're already going to get some gameplay. So, welcome to the Lazy New Pack launcher. This is the place where you need to tweak all of the things depending on your PC. Like, what I already mentioned in the earlier video is that you can pretty much run this game on anything, but as this is a simulator and it simulates the dwarfs, and every single dwarf gets its own, amount of CPU dedicated to it and what they do, obviously the more dwarfs you're going to have, the slower the game is going to run. So I'm running on an 8-core. I have shifted the Dwarf XA process to a separate core, so it doesn't really, sorry about that, so it doesn't, mesh with anything else. So what you would like to do is if you have a kind of a bad PC, you probably want to tone it down a little bit, so maybe to about 50. I found that running on my kind of low-ish end laptop, 50 to 60 dwarves were pretty much ideal, so it didn't really get a little bit more fuzzy than that. Now the only thing you actually need to make sure is that you cannot set the population cap too low, otherwise the game is not going to activate some of its gameplay features, for example, invasions, and so forth and so forth. So, anyway, what we're going to do now. So, gameplay options. The population cap here is split into 3 things. The first one is the soft cap, so basically how many dwarfs you would like to obtain, right? So basically what happens is that when you play the fort, you start off with 7 dwarfs, as you will see in a later video, and subsequently you gain more dwarfs by either waves of immigrants from other forts. If they get destroyed, they are going to come to your fort instead and chill, or by the old-fashioned waves, old-fashioned way of dwarfs fucking. So the soft cap is how many dwarfs you would receive via migration, while the strict cap is actually going to place a strict cap. It means that the amount of dwarfs you will get, not only you won't get migrant waves, but you also will not get any births. As you can see, actually, I have the tooltip right here. Strict limit on population of your fort blocks births. The child cap is a maximum amount of ratio of children in your fort. We're going to talk about those a little bit later, but basically what it means, a child dwarf is a dwarf who does not do anything much apart from hauling some specific things. But it's okay. We're going to, touch upon that a little bit later. Invaders. Simple enough. You can toggle this off if you're a completely new player and you just want to know how the game works. I suppose we're going to do that now. Something to keep in mind is that when you save a game and you exit the game itself, you can then tweak these settings and it is going to apply to your current save. So for example, I don't want to get invaders until I feel that my fort is secure enough, so I'm going to just click on it and it's going to turn to no, and I won't have any invaders until I go back here and re-enable them. Cave-ins is a physics sort of thing, as much as you can say physics in game, but basically it means that unsupported levels are going to collapse. This adds to the overall design dilemmas you will need to face when you're building your forts, so I would say you need to, keep this on. It's not that hard. And, just keep this on. It's not really a big deal. So, temperature. That's actually simple. Depending on where you embark in a cold or hot climate, you might face troubles like water evaporating, so you don't have any source of, drinkable or, some kind of water where you can fish, for example. And in colder climates, you might want to disable this if you don't want the water to freeze, for example. I usually keep it on. It feels a bit more natural that way, and it also makes me, you know, kind of up to my toes so I know what to expect. Weather, pretty much the same thing. It means that during the game, the weather effects are on. You have rain, you have snow, etc., etc. Now, how this impacts the game is actually very simple. If your dwarf is out in the open and he gets caught in the rain or snow, they might start feeling a little unhappy because, you know, fuck snow. What else? In Tom Pets, this is a very specific feature. It means that if a dwarf has a pet and he somehow died, either of old age or some sort of accident, it means that the game is going to treat them as a, you know, buryable thing. So if you have some sort of, you know, graveyard for your dwarves, the game is going to, if you leave this on, the game is going to treat the pets as dwarfs, and they are going to get buried there. Some people don't like that. Some people think it's a waste of space, and I leave it yes because quite frankly I never felt that, you know, I would need it otherwise. And artifacts is the last thing. Artifacts are specific items your dwarves sometimes create. Now, how they do this, I'm going to explain a little bit later, but basically involves a dwarf to have a moment of epiphany, and they want to create this artifact. And they need depending on who they need a custom set of items. And if you don't have these items, they're gonna get highly upset. It's like, oh no, I want to build this, but I don't have anything to, you know, build it out of. And then they might sleek into depression, or they might go berserk and, you know, actually harm or even kill some other of your dwarves. So many people actually disable this. But I'm gonna leave it on just because I will want to show you how this mechanic works. Grazing is basically how animals interact with the landscape. If you have animals that feast off of, you know, grass, you can actually change this a little bit so you maybe need smaller pastures. Again, nothing too serious. We might as well keep it on. Storing labors, we're not going to touch this at all. We're going to touch this one, aquifers. Now, what an aquifer is in real life is if you've ever seen a well, or at least seen a well, maybe not in real life, but maybe in movies or whatever, you know that it goes deep, deep, deep down into the ground and into a water source. Now, this water source is called an aquifer. It's basically an underground sort of lake. Now, the problem with that is, we in Dwarf Fortress like to dig down, and when we hit this water, it kind of becomes problematic to go deeper, and we always want to go deeper because that's where the good stuff is. So many people actually remove this, and for the sake of this tutorial, I am actually going to turn this off. Now, the embark profiles, we're not going to touch on this. Basically, it's... when you embark on a site, I realize that doesn't explain much to you at this point. It gives me a chance to use preset profiles. I don't want to change anything here. Whatever. Key bindings, everything's fine here. Let's move on to the graphics. Now, as I already said, one of the problems that people face with Dwarf Fortress is that they get a little bit confused when it comes to ASCII. I can completely relate. I hate ASCII. I hate Dwarf Fortress and ASCII, so I'm going to use a tile set. What a tile set is a set of tiles that get used instead of the ASCII symbols, right? So the one that we are going to use is phobias, and there's a couple of things that over here we can choose, but we're not going to actually, you know, do anything here. Then you have utilities. This is where you launch them. I just made a shortcut for Dwarf Therapists over here. You have advanced, such as sound or intro movies. And the only thing that we are going to do here is actually nothing. So the game is simulated in 50 FPS. It means that there's going to be stuff going on. in 50 FPS. You might want to increase or decrease this depending on if you feel that the game is kind of too fast or too slow to your liking. And that's it. And DF Hack is a specific tool that we are going to cover in a little bit. It actually makes the game a little bit more accessible. It provides a lot more options that many people actually find a little bit confusing. Hopefully I can explain them in a way that it's not going to be confusing for you. So let's recap. Basically, when you launch this thing for the first time, the only thing that we are going to make sure to do is, first of all, we're going to turn off the aggro-fires, we're going to turn off the invaders, and leave everything else as it is. So stay tuned for part 3, and we are actually going to launch the game, and we are going to dive into Dwarf Fortress. This was Spazzy Dragon aka Syndromes. Have fun.